Hi guys, welcome to the video, welcome to RAF Chivener, and welcome to this beastie here. This is the Piper PA28 Arrow 3. It's by Just Flight, and we're running it in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 today. And the reason we're in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 is because of the night lighting and the night effects. So what we're going to do is we're going to do some night VFR navigation, and we're going to try and get from A, B, C, D and finally to E. And I'll go over the route in a moment. But fundamentally what we're trying to see is if there's any substance behind the shine. So obviously MSF 2020 is a very aesthetically good sim, it's just whether it's accurate or not. I've already done one video in relation to daytime VFR, but this was suggested as a follow-on by some of my patrons on Patreon. So without further ado, let's have a look at some charts. Okay, so what I thought I'd do first off is I thought I'd just quickly go through our intended routing, and I'll just mention some of the bits along here. Now this is not intended to be a tutorial, it's a long time since I've flown VFR at all, in excess of 10 years, and the latter stages of what I was doing were all flight in instrument flight rules for my ATPL, etc. So as I say, the caveat is it's a long time since I did any night navigation, but what I will do is I'll talk through my thought processes in terms of all of these squiggles. I will also point out that this chart is out of date. This chart is circa 2010, so obviously some of the information on here will definitely be wrong, so it's not for any use other than just messing around in a sim like we have here. So as you can see, what we're doing is departing from Chivener down here. Now I'll mention Barnstaple in a moment, but we're then going over to Tiverton, then we're going up to Taunton, then we're going up to this point here, which is just on the edge of Weston-super-Mare, then we're going up here to Newport, and then across to our final waypoint over here, which is Gloucester, or Gloucester-Kemble, I think the airfield is. So as you can see, it's not marked out massively crisply. As I say, it's not intended to be a tutorial, but I'll talk through the logic behind some of the areas here. Now before we even get started, there's a couple of things to bear in mind, and you'll see that it will relate to the waypoint choice and the timing choice. The easiest way to do that is to have a look at the first leg. Boom. So the first thing you'll see is I've rotated it so that we're flying along the track, or best as we can. The first point is Barnstaple. Why have I chosen Barnstaple? Well, we need to, as with any VFR flying, we need to depart from a defined point, really. So in this case, we could depart on top Chivener, but nearby to us we've got a lovely town of Barnstaple, so there's no reason why we can't use that. If I just try and zoom in a little bit, hopefully the picture will hold its clarity. The other thing you need to be doing is you need to be making sure that your points are unique and identifiable by some means or another. So Barnstaple, as you can see, is a large town, this yellow blob here, which has, if you like, a river running through it and a railway running through it that splits it in half. So it's a nice feature in terms of our start point. So rather than try to come back over the top of Chivener or depart direct from Chivener and come out here, if we were to fly straight out and come out here and just roll out onto our heading, our anticipated heading, which is 124, then we would automatically be adding into an error into our navigation. So for me, VFR flying, it always makes sense to have something you can positively identify to depart from. The next thing you'll notice is that a lot of the roads in this are highlighted in red. Now, a lot of the time in cockpits, you will use red lighting to protect your night vision as best you can. The problem is, under red lighting, red roads do not show. So although you can have it on the chart, you need to be mindful that you may not be able to see it in the air on the chart. You'll certainly be able to see the road in terms of vehicle lighting, etc. Most of the time. Obviously 2 o'clock in the morning it's going to be less prominent, but obviously somewhere out in the country you might even find that country lanes or smaller roads, B roads for example, don't have any lighting on them at all. So unless there's a car there, you're not going to see it. Now objects with vertical extent are very difficult to identify at night, and also they're very difficult to determine distance from. So you'll notice that none of the waypoints I'm using are selected on the basis of vertical descent, vertical appearance. They're all going to be things that are predominantly going to be towns. Now things that do stand out at night are towns, certain motorways and major roads, certain lighting constructions, so maybe the Severn Bridge, for example, lighthouses or lights with particular flashing colours and patterns, things like that can all stand out. The difficulty is if you see a mast light, it's very difficult to determine your distance from that. So although they can be useful navigation features, one of the key things for me is that it's very difficult to determine that distance you are away from it, either in terms of navigation but also in terms of safety. Now, in terms of marking legs, there's a number of ways you can mark legs, and it's easier to do in VFR than it is in daytime VFR than night VFR. So in terms of marking legs, let me just zoom this out fully. You could have a situation where you go, well, between there and there, the halfway point is here. There's a quarter-way point here and a quarter-way point here. That's a very useful system, because what happens is you get to the quarter-way mark and you're over here and you go, well, I'm 2 miles left of track, but I'm actually 4 degrees off track or 5 degrees off track. What I can do is make a 10-degree correction to the right. That will bring me back onto track at the halfway line, and then I can, at the halfway point, and then I can just subtract the 5 degrees to get back to the intended heading +5, and I should track pretty much the rest of the route. So in effect, what you do is you work out by virtue of the first quarter timing point, you'd work out whether you're ahead of time, behind time, whether you're left or right of track, and then that adjustment can be made relatively easily to not only get to your destination but bring you back onto track, so you're tracking this line. It's important not to accept errors, so if you realise you're over here, it's no use just paralleling it, because there are areas such as restricted zones that you just aren't allowed to fly over. Another method is to use a 6-minute work cycle, and a 6-minute work cycle will say at 6 minutes put a mark there, another 6 minutes, put a mark there, and then in that 6-minute work cycle, in effect, you should travel a tenth of your intended ground speed to that point. So after 6 minutes at 100 knots ground speed, we would anticipate being 10 miles along track. Now the problem here is, if you look at this, we're saying that we need readily identifiable features. Now, bearing in mind we can't see relief, or certainly can't see relief that well, a lot of features like valleys and low hills become a bit redundant because you can't see them properly. So with night VFR, and to be honest with day VFR, what I tend to do is revert to picking the best objects that I can see, or the best locations I can see, to confirm my fix, and then I use the standard angle process of getting back on track, which I might cover later on. But the standard closing angle is something that I would consider the most useful in these circumstances, because then you don't need further fixes along the track to kind of say, well, I'm back on track or not back on track. You've got the geometry to do so. So as you can see in this instance, it's not a particularly memorable figure, but on this leg, it's the only really good fix we have is this relatively large town of South Molton. So on the chart, couple of things, because red lighting doesn't show red, you also can't use red pen, and so things like lines, timings, etc., big thick black bold lines, and then other features you might want to draw around them, highlight them, or mark them as you see fit. Now in terms of turn points, the other thing you need to make sure is that wherever you have a turn point, it's something again that I say is unique and identifiable. So here we have Tiverton, and you can see it's got this kind of S-bend of dual carriageway running around it to the north. We're unlikely to see the river, but we will definitely see the town, which is really good, and we will most likely see this sort of S-bend of motorway to the north of it. So that becomes our waypoint, and it's more a waypoint by virtue of what else would you use as a waypoint around here? Visual navigation. So in effect, that's the first leg. Let's pop on to the next one, have a quick look at that. The next leg, so departing from Tiverton, going up to Taunton, quite a short leg, but you can see we've got check mark at 5 minutes 20 is this small town of Wellington. Now what we've got here is a pair of roads paralleling our track to the right hand side of Tiverton, so that should be relatively straightforward. And you can see along track there's not a lot of choices before we get to Taunton. Now the reality is Taunton's a very large town, so we might actually see Taunton before we see Wellington. But even if we see Taunton, what we want to do is have Wellington available as a check in terms of our times, because we may need to adjust times and headings as we go. Now, things to be aware of: parachuting sites. Some parachuting sites do operate at night. You can't just go blundering through it, although normally you'd see a NOTAM, or you should see a NOTAM for night parachuting in effect. Merrifield is a military airfield. It's a satellite to Yealton out here, so this area is quite a high area of intense aerial activity for low-flying helicopters, etc. But obviously the military operate in open FIR airspace at night. But you can also see we're passing underneath the Class A airspace here. Cardiff control zone and area is up to here, and Tiverton is relatively identifiable. It'll be relatively identifiable purely by the fact of its size more than anything. But hopefully we'll see the motorway running both to the south and then up to the north from it. So this kind of curve in the motorway. This is quite a short leg. However, it's a busy leg. You can see we've got Bridgewater for our timing here, 3 minutes 55. And then we've got another point of timing here, 7 minutes 50. We're just passing this spur here. And then we're going to be timing ourselves, or we're going to be flying to the westernmost tip of Western-super-Mare here. Now you'll notice on the chart there's other areas, like there's a lighthouse here. Things like that you would expect them to be visible. Now in real life, although I'm not going to be doing it in the sim, I would be talking to either Cardiff or Bristol, and in this case I'm not quite, Bristol's control area is here, it's 2,000 feet or above. Now in daytime VFR, I would potentially be tempted in certain areas to fly under the controlled airspace and just be responsible for my own navigation and traffic separation, and maybe with a listening watch, a listening squawk. In nighttime over water, particularly going to spend any time over water, for me it makes sense to have a radar service. Whilst I think about it, water can occasionally be a useful navigational feature, because obviously if it's moonlit, so you're looking across the water to the moon, it reflects off the water, and sometimes you can see a very clear outline of coastlines, for example, or you can see water masses or water bodies. But for me, I wouldn't put it down as a reliable navigational point, because you just don't know if it's going to be visible or not. You can make an educated guess, but for me, I'd not bother. And next leg is this one. This is the really short one. There's no point putting a marker in here in terms of we're halfway, quarter-way, whatever. A couple of reasons. Firstly, what would you refer your point to? There's no point that you can refer to yourself and say, I'm going to check my lateral navigation or my timings. The second thing is you've got a whacking great built-up area off the left-hand side. This is going to be your standout feature. And if you're flying straight towards a massive bundle of lights, you know that you've got something wrong. So you do have the gross error check departing this point. I mean, this is a really nice point as a reference point, because it's very unique in terms of the area. If you look around, we haven't got any triangular spurs on the east or the west, other than that one there for western. But also, in addition to things, you've got to be aware of things like wind farms, and you've got the Severn Bridge up here. Now I've highlighted and circled the Severn Bridge, which I'll come on to in a moment, but obviously we've got a couple more restricted areas up there. But really the key thing here is we're looking at Newport. So Cardiff should be easily identifiable, as should Newport, and basically we're just aiming to get to the right hand side. And as you can see, the writing I'm doing on here is the minimum that I think would be helpful. And then the final leg is quite a long leg compared to the others, up to Gloucester. One of the difficulties here you can see is there's not a massive amount of readily identifiable features where you would say, yeah, I'm definitely at this one as opposed to this one. I suppose here you've got the opportunity potentially of the river, but I wouldn't want to rely on a river personally, because you don't know what the visibility is going to be like in terms of if it's in a valley. It looks like it's in a valley, so you might not actually see it until you're literally on top of it. Whereas here what we've got is we've got kind of a cross. It's quite a distinctive figure here. So we've got quite a large town, unlike the others which are smaller. And we do have some nice lead-in features. So we've got the water out to the right. If we see that, that's useful. A cross of built-up areas. So we'd expect to see 5 distinct built-up areas. And really, apart from that, there's not a massive amount here that you can choose as a reference point. So I've literally gone for the one on the basis that I can be fairly certain of my navigational accuracy here, i.e. if I'm over water, I know I've really made a mistake. But as you can see, the roads don't really help. There's not really much in the way of roads paralleling where we are, reliant on this stopwatch in the chart here. But that's how navigation goes. And then up to Gloucester. It's a fairly large airfield, so we should be able to find it relatively easily. But the key thing here is that Gloucester, we can follow it around the left-hand side of it, and hopefully we will find our destination. So without further ado, let's jump into the aircraft. So here we are with our trusty Arrow 3 at Chivener. This is obviously the Just Flight Arrow, as I mentioned earlier, and lovely little thing. There's just some lovely little touches with it. I'll point one out that I've not encountered before, to the best of my knowledge in any add-ons, is the turbulence noise from the prop. If you've ever stood behind a prop aircraft, you'll be familiar with that noise. But obviously, as you come around the side, it goes. So, lovely little feature that. I do like that. It's full of little bits and bobs. So, I'll demonstrate another one of them now. In terms of the door, quite often you'll have add-on aircraft where you simply do that lock for a Piper and it'll fly open and it's all good and dandy. You think, well, in the real thing, first of all, you've got to undo this. And notice it just moves out slightly, which is consistent with the real thing. They often do that when they're starting to get a bit tired. Likewise, here's your latch to open your door, so that's it fully open, and then you've got your ability to open it there. Notice the sounds are different. You can lock it. Different sounds for that. Very nice. So here, down here, what we've got is we've got our autopilot. We are going to use this during this. Basically, it has very simplified modes. So autopilot on off. This is a roll control if you wanted to use it as an independent roll control rather than following a particular mode. Heading control on or off. Now heading will control the heading in relation to these modes. We're just going to fly in heading, and then up here there's a little click spot, which is kind of a hidden click spot, which will work as an altitude hold, which will be pertinent to us because we're going to be lazy and use the altitude hold. Let's just check how we're doing with fuel. Got loads of fuel, balanced. Doesn't matter what tank this is on because we're going to do the following. I'm going to come over here and I'm going to check what options we want. Now at the moment, ready to ignore all that. Maintenance we don't want enabled. Copilot is disabled. Auto fuel select, basically that switches over between left and right tanks. Something you'd have to do manually in this aircraft every half hour, but in this you can select auto swap over. The GPS, we're not using the GPS, so we can leave that. State saving, no, don't worry about that. HSI, we will be using that. No yokes showing, no chocks, tie downs, tow bar. Cabin door is closed, baggage door closed, oil door is closed. And then we've got our flight information. Just have a quick look through that. Nothing to affect us really there. Turn it off. In fact, what we'll do is we'll get rid of it because we're not going to use it. Use the intercom switch. There we go. That's gone. Okay, setting up for the actual night flight section. This is the dome light. This is what floods the cabin with red light. The reason why it's red light is because it has the least impact of any light colour in terms of vision. So it tries to retain as much as it can in terms of your night vision that's available, and that will light the entire cabin. However, the instruments will, in fact, what we'll do is we'll just bring our time forwards a bit. Yeah, it's that one, isn't it? Let's just come forwards to about dusk time. That's pretty, isn't it? Right. So you'll notice that just now we've got the red light starting to come in, which is all very good. However, what we're going to do is go down here and we're going to turn our actual lights on. Now the light control is this one on the very far right here. First click turns it on, and then if you keep rolling it, just the same as the real aircraft, the light intensity changes. So first setting is all we need. And again, it's just like the red light. What you're trying to do is protect your night vision. So what we do is we have the lights turned down to a point where we can still read them. They're still perfectly legible, but we're not going to be blinding ourselves when we've got very difficult to see lights potentially outside. And in real life, some lights are very, very dim, other lights are very, very bright, whereas in the sim, I think generally they tend to be of a consistent luminosity or a brightness, however you wish to describe it. So what we'll do is we'll make sure we're set up for takeoff. Get the throttle set just whilst we're here. Red, blue and green. Make sure we've got the first stage of flaps set. And in fact, before we go anywhere, our first heading is 124. So let's set this to 124. Other way, Richard. For those who aren't aware, this is quite a natty little thing that I've noticed. This orange bug here is approximately 10 degrees across in width. So from the tip to one side is 5 degrees. Makes it quite useful. So that's 1, 2, 4 there. Very nice. You could use the coarse needle in terms of setting up where you're going, but I tend to prefer using the heading because that's actually where I'm going, as opposed to this, which doesn't necessarily tell you where you're actually going. You can set it as a reference, is basically what I'm saying. But what we're going to do now is we're going to get ourselves airborne. Stupid parking brake on this thing. Not the aircraft in the sim, hate it. Try and maintain the centre line. Look to rotate about 65 knots. Airspeed is alive. Just about maintaining the centre line, very vaguely. Oh, missed the 65 knots, there we go. Leave the gear out until we've got no more usable runway that we can land on. Got no more left. Bring the gear in. Watching the speed for the flap speed. Flaps are up. Lights are off. Performance is what we anticipate. We are going to just pitch up a little bit more. Get a better rate of climb on this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fly outbound from Chivner for a bit, then I'm going to turn back in, and once we turn back in we will look at our first leg and setting up for that. So I shall see you in a moment. Okay, so as you rejoin me, you can see we've got Chivner down here on the left. Our actual departure point that we were going to aim to depart was Barnstable, which is just down here on the left as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring us further round to the left so that we're closer to our original departure point without zooming out, hopefully. And in fact, looking at the chart, Barnstable that's Braunton. Barnstable is this bit over here, so this is where we're departing from. You can see the sun's starting to set quite quickly now. So let's just put ourselves over towards Barnstable, because that's where we're going to need to start the stopwatch and set our heading from. So it's going to slow down a bit. Stop zooming. Now we know it's Barnstable because it's basically just the east of where we took off, and Barnstable is split in two by this river here. I'm not quite sure what the river would be called. What we need to do is we need to get down to the speed that we're supposed to be doing our nav at. Let's just bring it back slowly, and just checking T's and P's. RPM's a little bit higher than we would have wanted. 2230 is what we're aiming for. Probably about there. 2250, sorry. And our fuel flow, we're looking for about just over, we've got 8 to 10 there. It's probably a little bit, right, there we go. It's going to come back up as we reintroduce a little bit of power just to stop the speed from going too low. It should be about 10. There we go. Spot on the manual. Okay, where's my online stopwatch gone? There it is. Start the clock. We need to be on 124, so let's just make sure we are on 124 because we just tweaked it to get over Barnstable. This slightly late setting is going to be too much of a problem because it's relatively close to our existing heading. And what we want is our gross error check now. So once we roll out onto a heading, we need to do a gross error check to start with. The reason being is that it stops you trudging off into the sunset without actually being accurate. Now, gross error check is that we should be departing from on top of town, should be an airfield behind us, which there is, and there should be a main road running parallel to us for the first part of it. It does snake out to the left and continue out to the left, but I'm pretty happy with the fact that where we are, where we're going, and our timing. Gone just above 100 knots again, so let's get that back down. Now the first check is 5 minutes 5 seconds. We should have the town of South Molton to the left of us by 1 to 2 miles, and then another couple of miles beyond that, 1 to 2 miles to the northeast of that, we should have a road that runs north, west, southeast, etc. Should be a little confluence of sort of roads coming into South Molton altogether, but we don't need to look at that or worry about that until we get to 5 minutes 5 seconds. So what I shall do is continue with this heading, I shall continue with this time, and you can meet me in a moment. See you in a sec. Okay, so we're just on 5 minutes 5 seconds, and we're looking for a small town or village down to our left somewhere. Ah, there it is. So we're slightly behind time, probably about 15 to 20 seconds behind time. Just to look at it though, what we're looking at is, well, I suppose it's two parts of a village. So let's have a town, village, however you want to look at it. Let's have a look on the chart. There should be South Molton, and there should be the road to the left of it as we look at it. So there's the road, there's South Molton. We're probably actually about 30 seconds late, so I'm wondering if we started the timer a bit early and therefore would have a one-off error. So we can monitor that as we go. Let's just jump ourselves back in, monitor our instruments, check the heading. We can check it against this, make sure it's accurate, check the speed. Got to fly the speed, otherwise the timings don't work. And finally you need to check your direction, check your speed, check your altitude. So yeah, obviously if your speed's out, you're not going to match your times. Likewise, if your heading's out and you go spearing off here, you kind of end up with a big dog leg trying to get back to where you want to be, and that big dog leg is obviously longer, which means your timings are then out again. So it all kind of balances and plays a part together. But yeah, so this one does actually. Ah, there we go. Other lights. So you've got lights, other lights, some more lights, and some red buttons that you don't really want to touch in flight. They don't. You can actually fly because of the way the magnetos work. You can actually fly with these turned off. And what happens is the engine will still go. It basically generates its own power. Magnetos is one of those really weird things that some people get, some people don't. But yeah. Anyway, we'll just continue on. We'll see how we get on. And the next point is at 14 minutes. So I shall see you in a bit. Okay, so we're just coming up to 11 minutes. And we can see, although it's starting to get a bit misty and hazy, as if I think we're getting into this cloud. But here what you can see is a large town with kind of a swooping bend around it. As I look at my chart, the town we were after, which was Tiverton, has a dual carriageway to the north of it in kind of an S shape. So there you go, there's your dual carriageway. And it's got a road running north-south, a road running east-west, and so you should see 4 roads. 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Not quite see it. So this is definitely Tiverton, and although we are aiming here, we're hoping it takes us pretty much slap bang over the middle, and our ground track appears to be sort of here, so I think we're going to go straight over the middle. The next question then is, having identified it, positively identified it, because you've got to be very careful of confirmation bias with something like this. You need to actually say, right, I'm looking for these features, are these features there? And be quite definitive about it. But anyway, what we need to do quickly now is consider the next leg. The next leg is on heading 072 for 8.5 minutes. What we will do is we'll set it when we get over here. We were expecting to be here at 14 minutes. The timer at the moment is 12 minutes, so actually it's not too bad. It looks really murky and horrible over there, so I suspect there's cloud. Obviously in real life we would probably at this point think, you know what, I need to descend or revert to instrument flight rules. So instrument flight rules would be 50 in this direction. We're naughty, we're flying at 4.5. Should be flying at 5.5 or 3.5. But there we go, we're into cloud. However, let's just use our cheeky flight sim abilities. Flight sim power. I'm not quite over it yet, it's there. So we can continue where we're going. and then we can turn on target and we can check what our timer says. Our timer still says we've got about a minute to get there. So as we head away, we actually follow this road here. So we're expecting, as a gross error check, when we turn onto our heading, to be following a dual carriageway, and that dual carriageway will be out to our right. So here's the town. Let's turn left onto 072. Probably, if anything, turned a little bit early there. Yeah, turned too early. Never mind. Let's have a look outside what we've got. That's not too bad. We were anticipating flying straight over the middle of it, but yeah, we're down the left-hand side. What we'll do is we can do. How far do we reckon that is then? Half a mile? Maybe a mile? You can do a thing called a standard angle or standard angle or standard closing angle. That's it. Which allows you to get back on track. And what you would do is you turn at this speed. You turn about 30 degrees towards the track you want to regain, and 1 minute for every mile that you want to regain. So from 072 we'd be looking at 102. We'll just turn this to 102. And time 1 minute. And through the wonders of trigonometry, it should put us back on track without losing too much time. And to be fair, navigation is all about speed, time, distance calculations and trigonometry for angles, etc. But none of it's rocket science, fortunately. Otherwise, I and many others would be struggling. Losing a little bit of speed there. Just nudge the throttles up a bit. See how we're doing in terms of engine temperatures and oil pressures. That all looks good. EGT's high, but that's because we're just rich of lean with that. Sorry, just rich of peak, I should say. Yeah, speed's come back a bit. There's our 1 minute. So we can turn back onto our track of 072. Just let it settle down. So 072. Okay. There we are, we're off on our next leg. Right. So in terms of this leg, this is slightly shorter. However, our next checkpoint along this track should be 5 minutes 20. We should be passing the town of Wellington. And we should have the dual carriageway road just to our right. And then beyond that we've got the large town of Taunton, which is due at 8 minutes 30. So I wouldn't be surprised if this is Wellington down here and this is Taunton. Got good visibility, so what we'll do is we will confirm them using time rather than just going, oh, that must be X, Y and Z, because it could be that, you know, this is Wellington and Taunton's over here. So what we need to do is we need to make sure that whatever we're seeing corresponds with the time we're anticipating. Now in terms of the final point where we're turning at Taunton, Taunton's quite a large town. It's got significant motorway services, but it's got 4 sort of dual carriageways that go into it in a cross. So there's an east-west one and a north-south one. So what we're going to do is when we get closer, we're going to look at the roads, which fortunately are quite clear in this sim, in terms of determining whether that is or is not Taunton. But as I say, looking at the range and looking at the timings, it almost certainly is. And as I say, down here, I think it's going to be Wellington. We're looking at 5 minutes 20. We're already at 3 minutes. So 2.5 minutes to get there at 100 knots. 100 knots, not 102 or 103, 100 knots. Just ease the throttles back a little bit. And then wait for the aircraft to respond. It will sort itself out slowly, but there's no need to rush with with that. You're only talking about 2 or 3 knots. So it looked like our standard closing angle may well have just done the trick for us. We've got 2 minutes left, well, just under 2 minutes for 5 minutes 20. Now, of course, in the real aircraft, you'd be able to kind of scoot your head over and peer down the side, or you'd be able to kind of lift yourself up in your seat a bit, like that, to peer over. But obviously in the sim, it's a little bit more awkward, so... But we'll see how we get on. As I say, when you're sat in the real thing, you just have a little bit more flexibility to move around. But we're now at 4 minutes. Let's just see how we're doing in relation to this waypoint. Zoom out a bit. There it is. We've still not reached it. So yeah, we're going to be... Here's our road coming in from the right, which is supposed to be a dual carriageway. It looks like a single carriageway, but I think that's just how the sim depicts it. Here's the actual town that we're due to be flying over the left-hand edge of it. So we're half a mile out, maybe. It's going to be a bit awkward here, but in real world I would adjust the track so that we went over that. But I think the wind, maybe it's a little bit, might have compensated a little bit too much, or not compensated enough. But we're close enough. I'm quite happy with that. We've managed to positively identify where we want to be. That then, we're now at 5 minutes, and we were expecting 5 minutes 20 over here, so we're going to be a few seconds late. This then, by what we've determined there, is going to be Taunton. Now Taunton, we were going to fly straight over the far side of it, straight over the top. So you can see with our track, we're going to be close. Let's jump inside and see what it looks like from inside. Right. Now, as I said, we were looking for a crossroads of roads, so pretty much north, south, east, west. Here's our north, south, and here's our east, west. And we were looking at being over here. The motorway services are somewhere over here as well, on the about here on the M5. But we, as I say, we were looking at going pretty much over the centre, which I think we're going to just about do. And then our turn point is somewhere over here, basically. If you imagine where the lights run out of towns, this is town with our roads left, right, up, down, and here's a cloud just at the right point. So I'll see you in a moment once we get closer to the turn point. Okay, so you've rejoined me with a minute to go. You can see we're just coming out of that horrible clag. Ugh. But we were due to be flying pretty much over the far side of Taunton at the motorway junction at 8 minutes 30. The timer is currently 7:40, so we've got about 50 seconds. Now this is where we were aiming for, this kind of crossroads section of area down here, far side of the town. What we'll do is we'll actually keep going with our heading, and then we'll turn, and then we'll restart the timer on our on top point. So if I just look outside, yeah, so here it is. Here's the north, south, east, west. This is pretty much where, actually, we're not going to be too far off it. We were expecting the motorway services about here, and I can't remember from memory, they're either here or here. They're not that clearly marked as to exactly where they are on the map, but this is pretty much where we want to be, so we're doing okay. Timing seems to be a little bit of a consistent issue, because that's 8 minutes 30 now and we're not quite there. So I suspect we're slowing, or suspect the wind isn't quite as strong from behind as we thought it might be. Likewise, it isn't quite as strong from the right as we thought it might be. So, we need to take that into consideration. Now this leg is pretty much downwindish, so we shouldn't see too many changes, but the wind is going to be coming from our left quarter, so we might have to just tweak a couple of knots to our left. But the wind on this leg shouldn't be too bad in terms of speed. In fact, if I look at the log, the speed we were expecting down this leg was 107 knots, so only a 7-knot tailwind. But yeah, so out of a 12-knot wind, that's about half of the wind, so which explains why it's off at that sort of angle. So we are there at 9 minutes 30, which means we ran a minute late. The wind is clearly not as strong as we thought it would be. Our next heading that we're turning on to is 007. So let's turn 007. hate the sim for that. It's one of the things I really hate about the sim. I just have to wait for it to go under the nav flag. Zoom in a bit. Now what we'll do, because of the wind, we're going to compensate for that, and instead of 007 we're going to go 050. And we can restart the timer. Okay, so our next check feature is, says he, turning the map, at 3 minutes 55 we're expecting to be passing the town of Bridgewater to our right, and a small village of Cannington to the northwest of that, but the predominant features Bridgewater to the right, which is a large town with the motorway running north-south, but the motorway kind of has an S-bend or a bulge to the right-hand side, so it should be fairly easy to see that. So, I will see you in a couple of minutes' time. Well, a couple of minutes my time, almost instantly your time. Okay, join me with just over a minute to go, and we're just going to have a quick look now for this checkpoint, which was Bridgewater. Now, Bridgewater, let's have a look. We were expecting to see a large town on our right, and if you look, here's the S-bend of the main road, which we were expecting. So we were expecting to be here at 3:55, and we are here at 3:05. So clearly we're getting quite a strong tailwind. We'll have to set that into consideration. Right, this is where it comes into play in terms of we are 5 miles into a 15-mile leg, so a third of the time along we're a minute early. So I would expect we're probably going to be between 2.5 and 3 minutes early getting to our final point on the turn at Weston-super-Mare. So that's the point of a checkpoint, is it allows you to say, well, is my time going too fast, too slow? It could be a one-off error. It could be that we started the clock late and therefore, you know, that's a single one-time error. Fortunately on this leg we've got a second checkpoint at 7 minutes 50. Now if it's 6 minutes 50 when we get there, we know it's a single error, but it's not compounding itself. If it's earlier than 6:50, then we know that we've got an error which is a cumulative error in terms of speed. So what we're going to be able to do, as I say, is small town at, we'll look at it for 6:50, just before 6:50, and see what we can see. Now, inky blackness out here, but I'm just going to mention it. On the charts you often get lighting features such as lighthouses, flashing lights, etc. And in the Severn Estuary, looking at the chart, there's several. So there's Flatholme Lighthouse, there's Lavan Rock Point, that has a flashing light. There's another flashing light. The lights will normally tell you the colour of the light, or the intensity, or the timings. So I can't remember all the details, it's so long, but there we go. So yeah, I think we're trudging along slightly quicker than 100 knots. I think we're going significantly quicker. So let's have a look outside and see what we can see. We were anticipating 7 minutes 50 seconds. Then we thought, well, maybe it's a one-time error, 6 minutes 50 seconds. We're here at 5.5 minutes. Let's see what's outside. Well, there's the town. So we are... No, there's the town. That's not the town. That's where we've come from. So we know that that's okay, because as you see, we've got the S-bend here in the road. This is where we were supposed to be at 7:50, and I think we're going to be here at 6:50. So I think it's a one-time error, a one-off error. And that's an important distinction to make. We do have a red light out there, looking at that. It seems to be in the water as well. So yeah, maybe it has got Flatholme Lighthouse depicted. It'd be nice if it is. I mean, in real world aviation, they're quite useful features, because certainly in water, it's unusual to see a single red lamp. Oh look, out there, what's that? That is Cardiff. Very nice. Visible from a long way away. Again, airfield lights can be quite useful in terms of navigation features. But if Cardiff's there, on the other side, we should be able to see Bristol. Let's just zoom out. Not entirely convinced. Right, the timer is 6:43, got 45 seconds to go. Stick our head out. That's alright, I'll take that for timing. So, it's a one-off error. Confirmed it's a one-off error. The next thing we can do is we can look at it and go, well, okay, what's our actual turn point? Our actual turn point is literally on the pinnacle of the western kind of, where the pier would be, I suppose, which is going to be down here. Now we're due to be there at, let me see, 11 minutes 50, so it's going to be 10:50. The only thing we need to be mindful of now is our track. So, let's keep going and see how we get on. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be very interesting indeed. So, I'll see you in a moment. Okay. The time is now 9.5 minutes, so we would have been expecting 2 minutes more to get to our point at Western, or just slightly to the west of Western. However, minus a minute, we were looking at 10:50, we're now at 9:50, so do we think there's something within about a minute's worth of flight that could be a prominent spur of land with lights on it? Well, that looks not too bad, does it? The only thing I would say is we've drifted left of track because we were anticipating coming right over here. Looking at the aircraft line here, we're going to be about maybe a mile off where we wanted to be. However, it's a turn point, so I don't want to do a standard closing angle turn here, and we're not far enough off that using the sim I can accurately get us to that point really, because I'd just permanently be looking outside using this trying to steer the aircraft. So what we'll do, in fact, can I just scoot over here a bit? I find the camera controls a bit awkward. I can't wait for somebody to come out with an easy dock equivalent for it. So here we go. This is our prominent spur of land. We're at 10:50, so yeah, we're exactly a minute out. So restart the clock. That was a one-off timing error, and we need to just shift our nose 2 degrees to the right for this leg. However, what we're going to do, because we were slightly further over, we're just going to tweak it a little bit more. So let me just get back to the actual pilot seat, so I don't get parallax error. Zoom in. And we'll go for, instead of, what were we looking for? We were looking for 009. Yeah, we'll go 010. I think that's pretty much where we are, isn't it? No, 005, 010 is there. And there's no check features along here, because what we're aiming for is a very large lit area. Now I can't help but think with the way that this is faded here and faded here, actually we've got some cloud here. Oh, there you go, it's coming in, look. You see it just coming in there? So this leg is a short leg, 7 minutes 50, and we're already 1 minute into it. Now in terms of this leg, one of the things that's going to be interesting to see is we're coming up towards the areas where there's quite a lot of vertical extent in terms of bridges, etc. So there's some cables, wind farms, etc. supposed to be over here, and then the Severn Bridge, I believe, is supposed to be somewhere over here. So we'll see if we can see it, because we are going to fly near it. But we do have to be careful of elevation around here. There's quite some. Obviously, this is the Welsh mountains over here. So obviously they have a, shall we say, a good amount of elevation. And then over here we've obviously got high masts, etc. And it'd be interesting to see whether they're marked, whether there's any different lighting, because above a certain height they're supposed to have red lamps, etc. And although I have to say, I don't think I've ever flown near the Severn Bridge at night. But now you can see the distinctive shape of the coastline with the estuary running up this way, so the Severn Bridge is somewhere up here. Now, in terms of identifying our features, we were looking at 7 minutes 50 to be at the very right-hand edge of a very large town, the town of Newport. We were then going to have a gross area check of a very, very big city, well, a large city. I don't know if it's very big or not. I've been to Cardiff once, it was very nice, very, very enjoyable. But a friend of mine actually did his hour building up at up at Swansea, which is much further along the coast. But yeah, so that is clearly Cardiff. That means that is clearly Newport. We've got our gross error check. We were aiming to be coming across this point here. Now here's the road network that we need to look at. And looking on the chart, there's like a single, there's two roads coming from the left. So 1, 2 to here, and then there's one main road that goes out that we don't quite parallel. Well, there's two main roads that go out. There's one that we diverge from, which runs north-south, and one which runs east-west-ish, and we kind of go between the two. So north-south, east-west. That's my guess. Now we're expecting to be here. So at this point I'm just going to check the timing. 3.5 minutes. 7.5 minutes to get, 7:50 to get there. So do I think it's 4 minutes 20 seconds? No. So yeah, I don't think it's the wind. Mind you, we were a minute short on the previous leg, weren't we? A minute quick on the previous leg, and we're quick on this leg as well. So I think we must have a bit more of a southerly wind, which would explain the changes in heading earlier on. So the only problem now is we're not continuing further to the north, so what we'll have to do is consider the wind now. I think it's slightly stronger from the south. So because it's from the south, the next leg is northeast, so we'll have to just maybe add a couple of degrees to the right. As I say, this is not an exact science because I haven't got anything telling me exactly what the wind speed and direction is, so we kind of have to work it out on the fly. Again, this is not a tutorial, nor is it a lesson. But I'll see you in a moment once we get to our turn point, and we'll see just how far we are out. Just sort of take a quick moment to just look at this and say just how well I think they've done the lighting in FS 2020. I think it's really nice when you combine it with the lighting in the instruments. You can see the red lighting and the built-up areas with the street lights, etc. I think they've done a really nice job. Really nice job. Right, back to the matter in hand. We were expecting to get to our turn point at 7:50. Let's just use our cheaty option. And actually, it's not going to be too far off. We're expecting to be, look at the map, here, in this kind of saddly area here, where you see this road sort of area here. It's built up area, so we were expecting to be there. It's supposed to be a couple of masts over here and there and everywhere. Just wondering if these are wind farm lights. Don't think so. Don't seem to have any. But we're going to be about the right place, and it's got a minute to go, so we're not actually going to be that far off time, which is excellent. So it confirms that the previous leg was actually a one-time error, a 1 minute error in terms of our timing, because we've been on time and on track with this leg. I wonder if it's more by luck than judgment, but yeah, the time is now 7:20, so 30 seconds to get to about here. Take that as okay. Right, so brief our next leg. It's going to be 059, 17 minutes and 5 seconds. Got a check feature at 8:35. Gross error check, we should have water on our right hand side, hills on our left, which we're probably not going to see, but we are paralleling a road just off to our right, which is following the line of the water. So here we go, let's turn right. If I can find the knobby thing. Let's just do it like that. I ought to get something to map it to. 059 1705. Let it roll out. You've gone too far, Mr. Autopilot. However, it's a very basic autopilot. As I say, the actual aircraft autopilot, to the best of my knowledge, didn't come with any form of altitude hold. It was just done by the pilot trimming the aircraft correctly. Which, you know, there's no reason why that's not a bad thing. Okay, so we should have major road running away to our left, which we do. heading approximately north-south. That's there. Should have water out to our right, which is going to be this bit here, so confirm that. So we know we're heading in roughly the right direction, and there should be a road running approximately parallel with the water, which there is there. We've got a bit of cloud again here. So we're going to trudge along on this. There's no real sightseeing to be had here. Let me just quickly switch over to the other side. See if we can see the lights for the Severn Bridge. Now they would be out sort of about there. We would expect to pass them. Just a quick measure of thumb. So that's about 10 miles. Yeah, maybe we're a little bit early before we see those. Probably about 3-4 minutes they should have been on the right hand side. So we're 1.5 minutes. We've got a couple of minutes to go. But anyway, I shall continue trudging on, and you can join me in a moment. Just got just under a minute to go, and just as a quick thing, when you hear the word rule of thumb, it's obviously used for estimations or guesstimations. The bit of your thumb that is from your tip to your first knuckle on an aviation chart, half mil is generally 10 miles, so the second knuckle is about 20 miles, or on a quarter mil that first knuckle is 5 and the second knuckle is 10. So if I put my thumb against my chart, I can see that at approximately 10 miles we should have the Severn Bridge out to our right hand side. Now 10 miles at 100 knots is 6 minutes, so we're looking for 6 minutes on the timer, there or thereabouts. We should have the Severn Bridge over to our right. 6 is a really great number, as is 10 in terms of aviation, because 60 is obviously divisible by 6. So if you imagine you've got a speed of 100 knots, a tenth of 100 is 10 knots, and a tenth of 60 is 6 minutes. So every 6 minutes you cover 10 miles at 100 knots. So every 6 minutes you'll cover a tenth of your airspeed as a distance. Really useful. So now we're at just coming up to 5 and a bit. So at 6 minutes we would expect to see the road bridge. Now, I suspect it's that there. In fact, I've got a very strong suspicion it's that there. The only difficulty is that the real thing's got lights, whereas this hasn't. So if I was in the real world and I could see that, I'd be able to identify it from the lights and go, yeah, that is definitely the Severn Bridge. In fact, I think there's 2 bridges parallel to each other. There's a new one and the old one. I'm not entirely sure. It's a long time since I've been down here. But that's the kind of thing where there are unique features at night that are readily visible. I mean, the Severn Road Bridge is still visible in the daytime, but at night time it does stand out significantly. I was wondering what that really bright light down there is. Is it an airfield or a light? Not entirely sure. What have we got on the charts? Anything down there expected? No. Must just be some sort of obstruction light, I suppose. There we go. So yeah, sometimes the rule of thumb is actually quite accurate. But unfortunately, as I say, we've got the Severn Bridge, we just haven't got the sort of red lights that you would expect to see with a suspension bridge. I think it's a suspension bridge anyway, not sure. But we haven't got the pillar lights. Anyway, let's continue a merry way towards our destination, and as I say, our next check is 8 minutes 35, so I'll see you there. Okay, so we've got a minute to go to 8:35 now, and what we were looking at as our turn point was basically like a cross of villages, with the biggest village being to the kind of south and another one being slightly to the west. So let's have a pop outside at what we've got and have a look. Let's zoom out. So yeah, it's really difficult to determine. That could be one there, that could be one there, and there could be one there. The key thing now is to say, well, I'm not entirely sure that that's accurate, so I'm going to fly on time. I've got my gross error check that the estuary is still out to my right with a road paralleling it, so I know I'm approximately in the right place at the moment. But obviously the biggest giveaway is going to be when we see a Gloucester in front of us, which, with any luck, will be somewhere over here. But you can see it's a bit cloudy here, so it's not entirely readily visible at the moment, but I'm going to just jump in and I'm going to continue my way. I'm going to be very mindful of heading and clock now, because we haven't been able to positively identify our position to 100%. We know that our gross error check is right, but we haven't been able to double check our timing accurately, because as you see, once you get to smaller towns, smaller areas like that. I mean, that's one there, that's one there. We were looking at 850. Yeah, we're certainly on track. And I would say, looking by that actually we were looking for 8:35. This is going to be about 9:35, so we're a minute behind again. And that, from what I'm looking at on the chart, is going to be Gloucester. So now all we have to do is find the airfield. Now, Gloucester itself, looking at where the airfield position is, the runway's east-west. In fact, where's my poolies? I'd normally have done this before I got airborne, but let's brief ourselves on Gloucester. Just have a look at the airfield layout. GGG. There we go. Gloucester. Or Gloucestershire Airport. Doesn't really give us much help on that. Main runway 0927. We already knew that. There's not much in terms of help for that at all. Okay. We'll just have to see how good we are at spotting it. The fact that it's east-west compared to our heading, we can sort of line ourselves up here. East-west. Looking on the chart, it is on the very northwest, right by a motorway. Sorry, northeast of the town. So it's going to be somewhere over here, northeast by a motorway. The motorway runs north-south. So it's not going to be here. It's going to be a bit beyond it, I suspect. I'm suspecting we're going to be coming somewhere like here. Now, we're not anticipating being there till 7 minutes 5 seconds. If anything, we were running a minute out earlier, so what we can do is anticipate that we might see it slightly later than we were expecting. Now, the key thing there is I'm going to look out prior to the time anyway. I'm not going to make the assumption that it's just automatically a minute out, because it might be a minute out. It might have changed, as I say again, it's not necessarily going to be a one-time error. I think in this case it's going to be a continuous error, so I suspect we're going to be 2 minutes late, so 19:05, something like that. So anyway, I shall see you in a bit. Okay, so as you rejoin me, I'm just adjusting our heading slightly because our track was due to be taking us across the northern edge of this. This is now Gloucester down here. And from there, there's still a good 5 miles from this point here to the airfield. And the airfield has the runway running east-west. So we would anticipate orientating ourselves with this is going to be a runway heading that sort of direction. But as you look at the city, it's literally right on the furthest north-eastern edge of the city, right by the motorway. So we'll keep our eyes peeled. Does this thing take account of human error? There it is, it's down there. We're flying over it. Let's see if we can see it out the right wing. There it is. Oh, well, we're not too far off. What's the time on the clock? It says 18:50, and our anticipated time there was 17:05. 2 minutes out. So that was a cumulative error there. As I say, this is not textbook. Nowhere near textbook, in fact. To be confident that we can descend where we are. And we're high, we're also fast. Bring the power off. Make sure we trim. This thing flies really well, it flies just like the real thing, really. Brings back a lot of lovely memories from flying various PA-28s. Really stable to fly, nice to hand fly. Bit high for the speed, bit high for the altitude. Bit of a dive bomb approach. One red. It's going to go to 2, so we need to arrest it before it gets there. Slightly off centre line. There's the 2. Our approach speed's far too high. That's why we've ballooned and gone high again. Final stage of flap. Check the trim. The wind's been a bit of a pain. Slightly right, slightly. Not quite sure what the landing speeds for this thing are. I probably should have read up on them. Ah! Didn't put the landing light on. We'll just have to feel it down. Right. Landing light, damn you, where are you? Yeah, there's the stripe. Right, we'll just bring it to a halt here. Okay. There we go. Let's just pop ourselves out. And while we talk, we'll just pop the weather back to daytime so we could admire a lovely aircraft again. Right. Okay. So, we have managed to depart A, fly 5 legs, and get to B without killing ourselves. More importantly, what we wanted to look at is whether the night lighting is adequate for navigation to practice VFR nav skills at night. Now, they're significantly different to IFR skills. You're still basically flying VMC flying. You're still basically flying VFR. But what you're doing is you're changing your references in terms of what you're looking for, how to interpret it, and what features you can and can't fly to. And as you've seen, that the 2 key features are roads and built-up areas. Now, admittedly, it's not always the easiest things to find definite references to. So what you saw when we came up that final leg at 8 minutes 35 or whatever it was, where we had those 2 or 3 towns, it was kind of, is it, isn't it, is it, isn't it? So at that point, what you've got to do is put that out of your mind and go, okay, we'll fly the compass and the clock, and then what we're looking for at a particular time on a particular heading is X, Y or Z, which we found. We found Gloucester. So yeah, I mean, my thoughts are that the sim's perfectly good for practicing night navigation. Missing some of the features, so the 7 road bridge, for example, in real life, that's going to be a critical feature. That's going to be a really useful feature. I've noticed that navigation. Dartmoor. There's a few other things. So, for example, I've noticed that when I flew near Dartmoor, which is a massive mast, 4 lanes mast, anywhere near Dartmoor, you know, flashing red lights and all sorts around it. But yeah, so there you go, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you don't forget, so there we are, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, don't forget to tick like, share or subscribe. Likewise, if you want to support me in making further videos, please consider visiting my Patreon page. And until the next time, take care.